I can't take it anymore. You understand? I'm not going to live in this bedroom the rest of my life. I'm not happy there.
She stared him down with the same fire we once celebrated. But this time, it didn't feel romantic. It felt like control. The woman we had all defended, pitied, called brave for leaving her entire life behind at nearly 60, is now being accused of using that same sacrifice as a weapon. And the worst part? The evidence might have been in plain sight the entire time. Jenny and Sumit were supposed to be love's rebellion, an American grandma and a young Indian man proving that connection beats culture, age, and tradition. They fought for years to convince his family, his society, and honestly, many of us, that their love was real. Against the screaming matches, visa denials, and those painfully tense dinners with Sumit's mother, SADHNA, we picked a side. We believed in their bond. We thought she was the one being tested. What if that was all backward? As the years passed, and the show kept milking their struggle, things started to shift. Jenny wasn't melting into Indian life. She was resisting it, openly, repeatedly. At first, it looked like culture shock. But over time, behavior that once seemed harmless, like not learning the language or not working, started to stack up. Fast forward to recent footage, and we see something way more volatile: weaponized helplessness, outbursts, control games, and one terrifying pattern. Every time Sumit pushed for balance, for compromise, for support, Jenny had one card she kept playing. She threatened to leave India. What started as homesickness or stress soon began to sound like strategic pressure. It wasn't an "if it doesn't work, I'm out" plea. It became a script. You fix it, or I go back. Over and over. Again and again. Except, nobody ever asked, what happens if she really leaves? She takes their income, their show, her savings, and walks. Sumit's left with absolutely nothing. And she knows it. Now, look at SADHNA. This is the same woman we declared public enemy number one. But what if she wasn't trying to break her son's heart? What if she was trying to stop him from burning down his entire life, based on a fantasy? Because that fantasy, the one we were handed and told to root for, is cracking. And behind it, there's something a whole lot darker. What happens next will reframe every scene you thought you understood. She sold everything. Her furniture, her photos, her past. Then she cashed out her 401k like it was a scratch-off ticket and gambled it all on a man she'd never met in real life outside a screen. No prenup, no job plan, no local support system, just her suitcases, her passport, and a hardwired belief that Sumit was worth the leap. The show framed it as bravery. But now, looking back, are we sure it wasn't desperation? Jenny's move to India wasn't a visit. It was a full reset. And with every camera angle, TLC sold us the dream. Love so strong, it defied generational norms, cultural barriers, even family loyalty. Sumit risked being disowned for her. That's what they wanted us to focus on. The forbidden love. The star-crossed age gap romance. But while we were watching Bollywood-level drama unfold, we missed what was never there. A plan. No job. No income. No language skills. Jenny's arrival in Jaipur was supposed to be the beginning of a new life. But she didn't come as an immigrant ready to integrate. She came expecting comfort in someone else's country. She thought love would break the rules for her. And when it didn't, you could already see the resentment begin, low simmer at first. Their first few scenes together? Cute on the surface. But watch again. He's sweating every word around his parents, navigating shame, resistance, and centuries of social pressure. Meanwhile, Jenny's struggling to understand a basic menu. Hardly her fault, we thought. She's in a totally foreign environment. But was it really so foreign to her? She'd visited multiple times. This wasn't new. This wasn't uncharted territory. She had years to prepare. She didn't. So, what was really driving this? Was it about being with Sumit? Or escaping something else? A lonely house in Palm Springs? Feeling invisible past a certain age? It's valid to want more, don't get it twisted, but torching every backup plan and expecting another person from another culture to carry the weight? That's not romance. That's pressure disguised as passion. And here's the part that still catches everyone off guard. From day one, her presence made Sumit's life infinitely harder, socially, financially, emotionally. Yet he never asked her to leave, not once. Why? You'll never look at their first episode the same after what's about to surface. He wasn't Sumit when she first fell for him. He was Michael Jones, a young, handsome white man with chiseled facial structure, high-end selfies, and a made-up backstory. A model's photo stolen, a full identity constructed, messages written with care. It wasn't a slip-up. It wasn't confusion. It was a full-scale catfish operation, and Sumit was the one pulling every string. This is how the entire relationship began, not with love at first sight, but with digital fraud. We laugh at catfish stories online, but this wasn't a teenager pretending on Instagram. Jenny was in her 50s. She'd been video chatting with Michael Jones for months before the truth slipped out. And how did she respond when the curtain fell? She didn't leave. She didn't block him. She made plans to visit. She decided the lie was forgivable, that it was somehow proof of how badly Sumit wanted to connect. That decision changed everything. From that point forward, lies became part of the infrastructure. Trust was optional if the emotions were strong enough. Sumit learned that confession wouldn't end the relationship. Jenny learned how far she was willing to shrink her reality to keep her fantasy alive. Most couples start with shared values. They started with silent agreements to rewrite what counted as truth. And it wasn't just emotional. There were financial stakes baked in from day one. When Jenny accepted that a man who catfished her for months was still boyfriend material, what message did that send? That deception was tolerable, maybe even romantic, if it was for love? The show glazed over it as a quirky backstory. But in real time, that was the blueprint. Lie now, apologize later, and the emotion will paper over the cracks. It's easy to say it was all harmless. But this wasn't harmless. Because the lie didn't stop when she landed in India. That fake persona he hid behind? It was the prototype for everything else he would hide. His marriage, his finances, his timeline. And her response? Every time she stayed, every time she believed it would work, no matter the cost. Here's the part that never made it to daytime confessionals. Some sources say Jenny wasn't entirely in the dark, that she'd heard whispers, that she had clues about the marriage, even before production caught wind. But if that's true, why keep quiet? We've only scratched the surface of what was hidden from viewers. Sumit wasn't single when Jenny moved in. He was married, legally, socially, culturally married, and not in the distant past, but right in the middle of their fairy tale timeline. While she was shipping her belongings to Jaipur and draining her retirement, he was still playing husband in a traditional Indian household. His arranged marriage was real. His obligations were binding. And for years, he lived a double life no one on screen fully grasped. When the truth exploded on the show, it looked like a sudden betrayal. Jenny's breakdown in the hotel room, the silent devastation, it was raw. But here's where things get murky. This wasn't a man who slipped up once. It was a sustained cover-up with logistics, lies, and misdirection layered over years. While Jenny was wiring him money and planning wedding decor, Sumit was disappearing for work, getting extensions to avoid intimacy, hiding legal documents. That kind of deception doesn't survive unless someone on the other end agrees not to ask too many questions. Publicly, Jenny claims she had no clue. But behind production doors, there's noise, rumors from set runners, insiders on Reddit, even old friends suggesting that she had inklings. Nagging doubts she brushed aside, whispers she chose not to follow. If that's true, then the crying wasn't about the marriage existing. It was about being blindsided on camera. Not by the story itself, but by the fact that it was no longer hers to control. And as painful as it was, she didn't leave. She helped fund his divorce. The legal fees, the emotional toll, the cultural fallout, it cost everything. And she helped pay for it. At first, that makes her look like the long-suffering partner willing to fight for the man she loves. But the power dynamic silently flipped. Once Sumit was free from his first wife, he became completely tied to Jenny. Emotionally, logistically, even financially. Now, she was the one holding the receipts. And what about SADHNA, the screaming mother-in-law we once mocked? The woman who cried? Threatened? Controlled? She knew. She watched her son unravel a family-approved marriage for someone who couldn't even manage Indian currency after living there for years. Her opposition wasn't random. It was fear watching fulfillment turn into fallout. Jenny paid for the divorce. But Sumit's the one who lost his family. Everything they built started with a marriage both of them pretended didn't exist. No more secret wife. No more catfish identity. No more parents dragging him back home. It was supposed to be the beginning of peace. But instead, the moment Sumit's divorce was finalized, their relationship started quietly rotting from the inside. They weren't fighting the world anymore, just each other. Now with everything out in the open, what was left? No job, no stable income, no roadmap. The show was their only financial tether. Jenny's savings, the 401k she'd cashed out, was fizzing towards zero. Sumit wasn't working. He wasn't even trying to build something. And neither of them had a vision beyond surviving the next visa cycle or keeping the TLC cameras interested. You'd think that kind of high-stakes pressure would pull them closer together. Instead, it built a wall. Every episode showed another crack forming. Sumit withdrawing, trying to please everyone, but pleasing no one. Jenny becoming more vocal, more anxious, more visibly frustrated. And the intimacy, the thing that was supposed to make them worth fighting for, started to vanish. Not quietly either. She said it on camera. The stress, the situation, the weight of it all had killed their sex life. Those confessions should have sparked compassion, but instead, they exposed something far more dangerous. Neither of them seemed particularly shocked. Because here's the truth that started sinking in. For both the couple and for us watching, they didn't know each other outside of the fight. Their chemistry was rooted in rebellion, in secrecy, in drama. Without the chaos of relatives, government papers, or camera-worthy pain, what was left was silence. Awkward silences in the kitchen. Blame-heavy arguments over the smallest tasks. A slow, emotional drift that looked suspiciously like regret-wearing routine as camouflage. Jenny, once giggling about love in foreign lands, started to sound bitter. She was tired. She said it often. She missed America. She missed air conditioning, normality, her old life back home. But she never left. That's when people started noticing something strange. Leaving was always threatened, but never done. And every single time Sumit mentioned compromise, or hinted that maybe she could try to adapt just a little more, learn the language, participate in the home, build something with him, her fallback response wasn't dialogue. It was distance. Or worse, manipulation masked as heartbreak. The visa was no longer a paperwork issue. It had become a tool. If Sumit didn't meet expectations, the threat of return to America hung over his head and the show. Because if Jenny left India, filming stopped. If filming stopped, the money went with it. And since Sumit had left his whole world, his family, his safety net, his reputation, for this relationship, what did he have left to fall back on? It wasn't open leverage, but it was implied in every argument, in every eye roll, in every passive-aggressive comment about hating the food or the heat or the pressure. She wasn't adapting. She was warning. You fix this for me, or I disappear. And everything goes down with me. Now imagine living under that kind of tension. A marriage where one partner has all the power to end the reality, not just emotionally, but financially and publicly. Jenny had made herself the only source of income, future, approval, and even legal status in his eyes. She wasn't helpless, she was central. And slowly, Sumit began to cave in on himself under the weight of that. He stopped pushing back. He stopped bringing up the problems. That cheeky, mischievous guy we met seasons ago, who snuck phone calls under the table and laughed through the stress? Gone. Now he looked exhausted, checked out, defeated. You could see it in his body. Slouched posture, blank stares, dragging his feet through every scene. And Jenny didn't look much better. Her irritation was louder. Her affection? Erratic. And her participation in daily life? Nearly non-existent. Every step toward functioning independence in India was met with resistance or despair. It's one thing to miss home. It's another to live like you're unwilling to even open the front door. Those aren't signs of a cultural gap. Those are patterns of someone staying in a situation on their own terms, able to leave whenever they want, but choosing not to. Choosing to stay. Not necessarily out of love, but out of what she might lose. What happens when someone realizes the only thing tethering their partner is lack of options? That's when behavior begins to shift. When every kind word becomes currency. When silence becomes punishment. When comfort becomes transaction. What if this wasn't a partnership anymore? What if poverty was the price of control? This next part is where love starts to look a lot like captivity. Every time the tension hit a boiling point, she said the same line. Maybe I'll just go back to America. Not in a breakdown. Not in quiet sorrow. In a calculated tone, often mid-argument, when things weren't going her way. It wasn't an expression of defeat anymore. It had become strategy. Not just for Jenny. For the cameras. For control. The visa wasn't just a document. It was the trigger to every power shift in their mess of a relationship. Because in this dynamic, Jenny had something Sumit didn't. Freedom. Emotional, geographical, bureaucratic freedom. She could leave. He couldn't. If she packed up and disappeared tomorrow, she'd go back to Palm Springs with a headline and a paycheck. He'd be the guy who destroyed his reputation, lost his family, and ended up alone in a small apartment above a failed dream. What started as love across borders had morphed into something closer to hostage logic. Jenny never had to say it out loud. Sumit understood the consequences. If she went home, the show would likely end. The income would vanish. The public story would crumble. And he'd be the face of failure in a country where shame doesn't dissipate with time, it hardens. In Indian culture, reputation isn't just pride. It's currency. It controls marriages, jobs, social access, future decisions. When Sumit chose Jenny over his family and wife, he detonated his own credibility. And that kind of shame doesn't just affect him, it stains the entire household. Entire neighborhoods remember sons who dishonor their parents. And Jenny, for all her time in the country, never fully absorbed what that meant. Or maybe she did, and figured out how much power it gave her. That one phrase, "I'll go back," unlocks everything. Watch their arguments again. It always comes when Sumit questions anything. When he pushes back, suggests change, or even hints at his parents. That threat isn't about distance. It's about destabilization. She's not walking out to find herself. She's cracking the foundation so he'll stop asking questions. There's a huge difference between needing your partner and being afraid of losing them. Sumit isn't scared of heartbreak. He's scared of fallout, of everyone who told him this would explode, being proven right, of needing to crawl back to parents who tried to warn him, of being not just dumped, but embarrassed on national television by the woman he defied everything for. You can see it play out. Jenny's mood dunking lower as the seasons blur on, yet she never actually prepares to leave. No flight searches, no final suitcases, just verbal bombs. And the few times she did fly back briefly, it wasn't to start over. It was to reset her leverage. Absence makes the need sharper. And the need isn't always affection. Sometimes it's convenience. In a place where Sumit has no steady career, no real autonomy, and very few options without her, she stays central. She becomes the passport to stability. Sure, she complains. But she never detaches, and she knows Sumit won't make her. Let's not forget what that looks like on screen. Every chore she avoids. Every bit of Hindi she refuses to learn. Every time she claims things are too hard, too different. She keeps herself entrenched in discomfort, then uses it as ammunition. Emotional blackmail dressed as martyrdom. That isn't cultural incompatibility. That's a behavioral loop designed to create guilt. And Sumit buys it. Again and again. Because what's his alternative? Return to his parents who already view him as a failure? Try to find a new partner after publicly trashing his marriage and image? Step into the workforce after years of being known as the guy with the foreign grandma wife? No, he can't. Not easily. Who's really stuck here? This isn't a love story suffering under outside pressure anymore. Those days ended with the secret marriage. This is something different. Power is no longer in the hands of the man expected to provide. It's in the hands of the woman who controls the exit. And even that wouldn't be so damning if the threat was endangled every time she's challenged. That's not emotional vulnerability. That's manipulation. It turns every disagreement into a crisis, every request for compromise into betrayal, every silent moment into a standoff. He's not breaking up with his girlfriend. He's risking exile from the only life he has left. So when Jenny threatens to leave, it's not about homesickness. It's a stick she waves when Sumit starts asking, "What about me?" And it works. Every time. Just think about what that does to someone's identity. To avoid being abandoned, Sumit has to shrink, smile through silence, apologize for asking why she won't help him at the calf, nod when she refuses SADHNA's kindness, carry both their baggage, literally and emotionally, so she doesn't say, "Then maybe I should just leave." That's not how partners speak to each other. That's how trapdoors work. This isn't about love anymore. It's about leverage. And it's about to explode. She kept her voice sharp, her eyes harder than necessary, and her boundaries rigid. Sadhna Singh was the show's go-to villain for 3 straight seasons. We laughed at her melodrama, mocked her threats, wrote her off as the elder who couldn't let go. But somewhere between the calf disaster and the kitchen training montage, something flipped. Viewers who once rolled their eyes at her were suddenly watching closely, because when Jenny and Sumit moved into Sadhna's home after draining every financial resource, the narrative quietly shifted. Sadhna wasn't demanding gifts. She wasn't cursing them under her breath. She was in the kitchen, teaching, helping, guiding, patiently. She tried showing Jenny how to make chai, how to prepare dal, how to run a basic Indian household, not out of blind custom, but because their finances left no other choice. Cooking, cleaning, managing, these weren't symbolic roles. They were survival skills. But instead of stepping up, Jenny stepped away, rolling her eyes, shrugging, sighing like a teenager asked to sweep the floor. She saw it as control. Sadhna saw it as life in India without a safety net. This wasn't a clash of cultures, it was a gap in expectations. In Sadhna's world, everyone pulls weight. In Jenny's, love comes with comfort. But comfort was gone. There was no maid, no cash reserve, no plan B. Only family. And now even that was cracking. So what if Sadhna wasn't fighting to keep her son single? What if she was fighting to keep him functional? What if every tantrum, every scream, every brutal comment about Jenny's age or ignorance wasn't about hate, but fear? Fear of watching her son lose his ambition, respect, and purpose, all in the name of a woman who came but never truly stayed. Now rewatch the kitchen scenes. Sadhna doesn't yell. She instructs. She taps bowls gently. She watches closely, but not with malice, with wary hope. And Jenny? Doesn't even try to meet her halfway. It begs the question, did Jenny ever want to fully be part of that family? Or was she always standing just outside the door, waiting for them to follow her lead instead? Here's the shocking moment that made even Reddit flip to Team Sadhna. The calf was supposed to fix everything. After years of social exile, financial struggle, and clashing with two cultures that never blended, the Singh family placed a final bet. Not on love this time, but on business. They opened a small eatery, humble but packed with potential. It was supposed to be a reset, a lifeline, something that could tether Jenny and Sumit to sustainable reality. Finally, they had a purpose, a future. And then they pressed record. What played out on camera wasn't a business launch. It was a breakdown. From day one, it was clear the calf wasn't getting two equal partners. Sumit showed up. So did Sadhna, his father. Even neighbors came around. Everyone took a role. Cooks, cashiers, cleaners. And Jenny? She hovered. Confused, disinterested, struggling with rupees, not remembering basic orders, standing behind the counter but never feeling in it, like she was doing community service for a mistake she didn't admit to. This wasn't a one-time lapse. It was a pattern. Every opportunity to participate ended in a shrug or a sigh. Every mistake was followed by childlike retreat. Can't work the till. Can't take the order. Can't explain why she hasn't learned the currency after nearly a decade of visits. Can't. Until no one asked anymore. And when the pressure rose, when two customers walked in together, or a small crowd formed, she panicked. Froze. Like she didn't know she was being watched, graded, remembered. That's when people stopped blaming her for not fitting in. They started wondering if she ever tried to, because what we saw wasn't clumsiness. It was refusal. Embarrassment weaponized as defense. This wasn't someone failing at being part of the family's last hope. This was someone choosing not to feel responsible for it at all. Sadhna watched from the kitchen. Quietly this time. Her expression said it all. The woman who once raised her voice now didn't have to. Her predictions were unfolding in real time. Jenny wasn't adapting. She wasn't evolving. She wasn't even helping. Every single red flag Sadhna waved years ago? Validated. Circle-checked. Exposed. The age gap affecting stamina. The culture shock turning to hostility. The inability to integrate. The financial drain. All of it now painfully visible, not in one dramatic blow-up, but through spilled receipts and missed orders. Through the silence between scenes. The calf wasn't a backdrop. It was a mirror. And the reflection wasn't flattering. There's a moment buried in that footage that hits harder than any argument. Sadhna handing Jenny a ladle, lightly instructing her how to stir. Jenny, physically there, mentally elsewhere, waves her off with a tired gesture and slumps into a chair. The air goes dead. And just like that, the dream takes a hit you don't come back from. Because this wasn't Jenny being forced to become someone else. This wasn't about her abandoning identity. This was about minimum effort, kindness, community. Those are human things, not cultural ones. Yet the woman who claimed to love the country couldn't be bothered to understand its rhythm, or even pretend to move in sync. And people started asking the one thing no one had considered before. Was this failure intentional? Not in a dramatic, villainous plot, but in the quiet way that some people self-sabotage to avoid responsibility. You can't be expected to carry your weight if you've painted yourself as incapable. You can't be pushed to perform if underperformance is the norm. It's called weaponized incompetence. And it looks a lot like what we watched. Because, make no mistake, Jenny knew how this business mattered. She saw what it meant to Sumit's parents. She heard Sumit voice his hope, however faint, that this calf might bring purpose. Yet when the time came, she folded. Not with anger, with detachment. And Sumit? He looked broken. His parents picked up the slack. His wife picked up her phone. The footage was the final straw for a lot of viewers who had backed Jenny for years. Suddenly, it wasn't cute anymore. It wasn't about love prevailing or two worlds colliding. It was about one person trying to help their family survive while the other waited for the waiter. The calf didn't fail because of market conditions or location. It failed because it was built on one-sided hope. A few hands stirring the pot while one person kept wiping their hands clean. This moment broke the illusion wide open. And it's all on camera. It started with small jabs. An eye roll here. A dismissive comment there. Then came the name-calling. On camera. Loser. That's what Jenny called Sumit. Not once, but multiple times. In Western reality TV, it might feel like standard bickering. But in Indian culture, especially when aimed at a man who abandoned everything, that word cut deeper than most people watching could understand. It wasn't just one insult. It was part of a shift. One that turned Sumit from the young romantic defending a fairy tale into the quiet, apologetic provider for a partner who no longer viewed him as worth the fight. Jenny wasn't clinging anymore. She was commanding, frustrated, angry, tired of hiding it. And then it escalated. Public footage surfaced. Nothing massive, just a brief aggressive move during an argument. A lunge. Not full-blown violence, but enough to register. Enough to make fans rewind the clip, eyebrows raised. Physical tension where there should have been emotional support. That's when the energy changed. People who once sympathized with Jenny started watching her behavior the way we were told to watch SADHNA in season 1, with suspicion, with unease. Because by this point, the age gap fantasy was gone. Now, it was emotional weight versus emotional labor. When Jenny snapped, Sumit stayed quiet. When she complained about her life in India, he offered solutions. When she insulted him, he tried to steady the conversation. It was no longer a partnership. It was a one-sided emotional management system. And he was the one doing all the work. That young protector vibe we all rooted for in the beginning, it disappeared. Sumit wasn't standing between his wife and his parents anymore. He was laying himself flat, so she didn't have to bend. And here's the question that haunted all of it. Was this her endgame? Not the fairy tale wedding, but the dynamic. A partner who'd given up so much that he'd never challenge her again. Someone permanently indebted, afraid of her departure, and now stuck cleaning up after the mess they both created. We used to say Jenny gave up everything. But did she? She got out of a mundane life. She got fame, attention, the young foreign husband, the cameras, the cultural novelty. Meanwhile, Sumit, what did he get? He lost his family. He lost community respect. He lost financial independence. He lost job opportunities. He lost a version of life that, while maybe traditional, was stable and supported. All in the name of love that now exists inside insults and tension. His parents weren't prophets. They were parents. They warned him that this relationship wasn't built to last because they saw what Jenny refused to hide, the disregard. Not just for their customs, but for effort, for harmony, for humility. And now, after everything, the warnings no longer sound dramatic. They sound tired, honest, heavy. Because Sadhna and Anil may come across harsh, but here's what they didn't do. They never humiliated Sumit publicly. They never called him worthless. They didn't question his manhood. That came later. From inside the home, at every stage, Jenny was given grace by the family, by Sumit, by the audience. And yet, as soon as the fairy lights dimmed and real life began, something shifted in her tone. Instead of showing gratitude for having a husband who fought his entire bloodline to be with her, she started treating him like an underachiever she was stuck with. The man who sacrificed everything became the emotional punching bag she took daily shots at while playing victim on screen. Fans once applauded her for leaving her country to be in one that's harder to navigate. But after years, the refusal to engage, to learn the basics, to keep trying, it stopped looking like difficulty and started looking like disdain. At what cost did this love become reality? Sumit's? His family's? Or the respect that should have been shared between two people who said they chose each other against the odds? These scenes made fans question if she ever respected him at all. What if Jenny was never the underdog? What if she was the driver the whole time and we just missed it? We bought into the narrative. The older woman defying social norms, fighting for love in a country that didn't want her. Yes, queen. We tweeted. We called her brave. Called Sumit's mom toxic. Called the culture backward. We made Jenny the protagonist of a story that, if you rewatch with a clear mind, looks a lot more like a power game than a love story. And here's the twist that stings the most. What if this is exactly how they like it? Think about it. The constant tension, the bruised pride, the circular arguments that never go anywhere but always give us a scene. This relationship hasn't survived despite the chaos. It survived because of it. It thrives on friction. It depends on dysfunction. Without conflict, they're just a broke couple sitting in someone else's house in silence. That's not a marriage. That's a script. Now look at the evidence again. Jenny never adjusted, never tried to blend in. But she made herself indispensable to the show's format. She's emotional in every scene. Loud, reactive, predictable in a way that producers love. Sumit, on the other hand, is guarded, polite, visibly uncomfortable. Jenny brings the fire. Sumit brings the apology. It's a formula, and it worked for years. Which leads to a much darker conclusion. Maybe the problems we saw weren't just real. Maybe they were also useful. When a healthy relationship finally calms down, it fades from TV. But chaos gets renewed. Fights make it past casting. Loyalty to each other? Not as profitable. So, if you found a way to turn fighting into fuel, into fame, into monthly checks, isn't there a chance you'd start leaning into it? And maybe that's why every time things seem to settle, something strange sparks back up. A new visa issue. A comment from SADHNA. A misunderstanding over chores. Enough to reset the argument. Enough to keep the story interesting. Because somewhere along the line, love stopped being the goal. Survival took its place. So, who really got played? Was it Sumit, trapped under years of dependence, held in place by guilt, shame, and the fear of starting over? Or was it Jenny, always one argument away from losing the only leverage she has left? Or was it us? We watched. We rooted. We defended. We turned real people into edits into characters, and characters into brands. The same audience that hated SADHNA now quotes her. The same fans that cried when Jenny was denied her visa now see through her passive-aggressive tactics. And through it all, the cycle kept spinning. Jenny once said she gave up everything for Sumit. What if she did? And what if that sacrifice became her entire currency? Her fallback line, her trump card. Because no matter how much he deals with now, she still gets to say she left her country, her life, her money, and came for him. Even when it's no longer true love, the sacrifice keeps her centered in the story. Sumit, meanwhile, bet against his own culture and lost. He thought he could prove them wrong. that love matters more than language, that chemistry matters more than culture. But what he ended up with is a version of life he's not really living. He's managing. He's coping. And that future we thought he'd build? It's nowhere. Sadhna warned him. Anil stayed silent the way fathers sometimes do when they've already lost the argument. And now, years later, the family is fractured beyond repair. And for what? A relationship where one person controls the narrative by threatening to walk, and the other lives in fear she finally will. Because that's not love. That's survival theater. That's theatrical codependency. And maybe they prefer it that way, because if Sumit really wanted out, couldn't he walk? He's younger, employable. He has fans. If Jenny felt truly disrespected, couldn't she book a flight? They don't. Why? Because this is their bubble, their chaos. And sometimes, as twisted as it sounds, chaos is more comfortable than starting over. So, the story doesn't end with a breakup. It doesn't even end with heartbreak. It ends with something sadder. Two people in quiet ruin, clinging to a version of love that's long past gone, trading real joy for forced stability. And they're not the ones paying the biggest price. You are. But what if this chaos wasn't a mistake? What if it was the whole plan? Want to know what Sumit's brother revealed in leaked footage that never aired? You'll want to see this next.